Dumelang, welcome to Face the Nation with myself, Clement Manyatela. Great to have you with us here on SABC News. On the show tonight, tragedy has rocked the city of George in the Western Cape. Rescue teams are this evening extracting bodies and survivors from the rubble of the collapsed building. So far, 6 people have been confirmed dead, 28 have been rescued, and just over 40 are still missing. This building collapse is one of the deadliest in our history. We'll get a live update from our reporter on the ground. I see the construction company has now released a statement. We'll also speak to the Minister of Labour, Thulas Nxesi. His department must now determine what led to the fatal collapse in accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Also on the show tonight, an independent and credible judiciary is the cornerstone of our constitutional democracy. But how credible is our judiciary today? When is it going to be institutionally independent? Because it still relies heavily on government's administrative support. What is the impact of capacity constraints on the administration of justice? The head of the judiciary, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, whose term ends in 3 months' time, faces the nation tonight. But first, my comment. So tonight on the show, we are focusing on the judiciary. We have the head of the judiciary, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who will talk to us 3 months before his term ends. And I would like us, including yourself, to honestly reflect on the state of the judiciary tonight and also reflect on Justice Zondo's term over the last 2 years as Chief Justice. I think the judiciary has stood the test of time. There have been attacks on the judiciary, often by politicians across the political spectrum, particularly when judgments have not gone their way. Oh, but those same politicians are quick to celebrate the strength and independence of our judiciary when judgments are in their favor, which is a dangerous thing to do in our constitutional democracy. And unlike other arms of the state, the judiciary, our courts, rely on the trust and confidence of the people. So when the credibility of the judiciary is being questioned, unfairly so, where there are direct assaults that ultimately erode its credibility, we cannot afford that. So we all need to protect the authority of the judiciary to carry out its constitutional functions. And thank goodness we have a judiciary that hasn't folded in the face of attacks. A judiciary that's taken a tough stance on those who even defy court orders. But our judiciary is also not without blemishes. We have judges that are facing impeachment. We have judges that are facing corruption-related charges. We have judges that have failed and continue to fail to deliver judgments on time, even judgments that are on urgent matters. And yes, in some instances, it's because of capacity constraints, but in others, it's simply incompetence. We have some judges whose quality of judgment is below par. So what I'm saying is, we have a strong judiciary, but it's not perfect. And you and I are lucky to live in a country where, as much as we criticize other arms of the state, like the executive and the legislature, we can do the same with the judiciary. So my question for you tonight is, what is your assessment of the state of the judiciary today? And how can the credibility and independence of the judiciary be adequately protected? And that independence is paramount, right? It's unbelievable that the judiciary still relies heavily on the Department of Justice. You know, other people believe that the department has too much power over the judiciary. I don't understand why, for instance, it's taking so long to create a fully independent judiciary. But the executive needs to come to the party for that to happen. The judiciary, there was a time when they set up a committee to research the formats that an independent judiciary could take in the South African context, and has been ready to discuss the issue further with government for more than 10 years. But we were told, even by the Chief Justice, that judiciary had nothing from the executive. Why? Why is it so difficult to allow the judiciary to stand on its own and be fully independent of government, where it doesn't rely on funding from the Department of Justice to resolve some of its long-standing challenges. These are some of the issues we'll be discussing with the Chief Justice tonight. So the question to you once again is, what is your assessment of the state of the judiciary today? How can the credibility and independence of the judiciary be adequately protected? Please send us your WhatsApps right now. You can send them to us on 078-459-1897. That number is on your screen. Remember to tell us your name and your surname, where you're sending the voice note from, and please keep it at 30 seconds. Alternatively, you can send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. You can also send us the questions you have for the Chief Justice on X or also on the WhatsApp line. But we start here. Rescue teams are still hard at work trying to extract people who are trapped underneath the rubble of a building under construction that collapsed at George in the Western Cape. 75 people were on site when the structure collapsed yesterday afternoon. For more on this, we joined live by the SABC reporter Lwando Nomoyi, who is live on the scene for us. Lwando, thank you for joining us this evening on Face the Nation. What are you able to share with us? You have been there throughout the day. What are you seeing now? What can you share with our viewers?
Thank you very much, Clement, and good evening to you and our viewers at home as well. Well, we are going into the second night of the search and rescue. We do understand that over 200 rescue workers are here at this rubble site or this particular scene, whereby they are trying by all means to rescue the pinned victims underneath this rubble. As you can see behind me, that the situation is indeed critical. We do understand that confirmed. We know that 6 people have lost their lives, 28 have been rescued, over 40 are still unaccounted for. And you'd understand that, Clement, that after 3 days of this particular mission, we would understand that it would be just to recover, not to even rescue, because now time is against them, and it is indeed a race against time for them. Let me just show you some of the visuals. We do understand that some officials are standing in our way, but these operations are expected to continue throughout tonight as they slowly remove the rubble and the concrete slabs that have pinned some of the victims. We do understand that this was going to be an apartment building, a 4-story apartment building with a parking and a basement. We do understand that earlier on, Clement, we were also on the other side. As you can see right now, that rescue teams are stationed in different sites of this particular scene. On the side of the basement, which is to my right, we do understand that there were 4 people that were actually making contact to the rescue team. So the operation continues. As you can see, the use of heavy machinery, the drilling that is currently ongoing, and we do understand that the criticality of this particular mission is very critical in saving the lives of the people that are actually pinned down underneath this rubble. So the operation, as it's ongoing, as they're drilling through the rubble, once they see or hear contact, everything goes into absolute silence, and that's when they will try to at least make some contact with some of the victims. We do also understand that an independent investigation will be launched into the cause of this particular incident. Clement.
Lwando Nomoyi, live to us from George. Thank you so much for that quick update. And of course, our prayers are with the people that are in that rubble waiting to be rescued. Now, the Department of Labour is under pressure to determine the cause of the deadly building collapse in George. Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi joins us on Face the Nation tonight. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. Your team arrived on the scene. They've been inspecting, investigating. What have they been able to tell you so far?
Well, in terms of the protocols, that particular site is not yet handed over to us. It will only be handed over to us once all the investigations are complete by what we call the disaster service personnel, which includes SABC, search and rescue teams, who are there with their sniffer dogs, and they are involved in those rescue operations to retrieve the trapped construction workers. So, and at this stage, our teams cannot be able to do anything except to observe. But we've been able to dispatch our Director General together with the inspectorate, the chief inspectors, to go and observe until such time that it has been handed over to us. Then we will start the investigation. Unfortunately, it is the protocol we have to observe. But I must say, as a start, let's convey our heartfelt condolences to the families and the friends of the deceased construction workers involved in this incident, and wish those who are injured speedy recovery. But all we can say now, no words can adequately express the sorrow which is felt for the lives lost and the anguish in particular experienced by those who are awaiting the news of their trapped loved ones. So our thoughts are with them during this difficult time. So in terms of our protocols of occupational health and safety, then we have to wait.
As soon as you're given access and you can start your investigation, what becomes the scope of your investigation? Are you focusing on the Health and Safety Act? And will this take a form of an inquiry at some point, or is that too early to determine?
Obviously, we act in terms of what we call Section 31 and 32 of the Occupational Health and Safety. And in terms of that, we will have a proper investigation, which takes time. Remember, we are dealing with a very sensitive matter. We don't have to rush it. We have to be meticulous in doing it. We have to engage our experts in the engineering field who are going to look into all the aspects of that construction. And then they will be able to determine whether the cause of the accident was negligent or was it a real disaster. So when we deal with such, we have to be meticulous.
From what we have dealt with in this country before, my understanding is that this is one of the deadliest building disasters and building collapse we have seen. There are instances where people have died, but in this case, we're talking about 6 people that have lost their lives. There are many others, over 40, that are still missing. What is the culture of health and safety, particularly in construction? And do we often see consequences in cases where there's negligence that has been determined?
This industry is one of the industries where you have a lot of accidents. And we've been trying to conscientize the employers in this particular industry that they need to take all the necessary precautions. We've had some of the accidents, but not as like this one, which you are talking about, which is so deadly. And in those incidents, we do the investigations. After the investigations, we hand over everything to the NPA, who will decide whether to prosecute or not. In some, there have been consequences, while in some, they have been declared as real accidents. But ours, it's not necessarily to prosecute anybody, it's to give the facts as they are, and then we hand them over. But what is going to be very helpful, this reminds us of what I would call collective responsibility to honor the memory of those lost in the different accidents by ensuring that their lives are not just lost in vain. So strengthening the commitment to health and safety is very essential. And therefore we need to work together as the employers, together with government and the unions.
And strengthening that compliance to health and safety also involves your department being proactive and not reactive. What do you do as the Labour Department in ensuring that there's compliance when it comes to the health and safety, and in this context, in these construction sites?
That's why we always have our inspectors visiting the various workplaces, including the construction sites. But at that particular time, when people are still constructing, it's very difficult to detect what is going to happen. But there are certain basic things which our people would look at in terms of what the protective clothing which the workers are having and how they are putting the various basic materials and so on. But in this particular case, we cannot be able to say what exactly happened until we've done an investigation.
Yes, and I accept that. Suppose what I'm asking is, how intentional are you as the Labour Department to ensure that you send inspectors to these workplaces, and in this context, to these construction sites? Because often we hear of how you don't even have enough inspectors as the Labour Department, and there are consequences when there are no inspectors that are going to these workplaces, because sometimes there are things that they can determine there and uncover that they can flag that can save lives.
No, let's deal with this matter. There will never be enough inspectors in our country. There are more than 3 million workplaces which are registered, and we have about 2,000 inspectors, and these inspectors are divided and they specialize according to the different categories of these industries. There will be those who are dealing with construction, a particular number, and dealing with another industry. So they rotate into the different construction sites. They go there maybe once in 3 months or once in 6 months. But in reality is that we will never ever say we have enough inspectors. But those who do that, they visit the inspection sites, they raise alarms if they see something which is dangerous. Some of what they raise gives the employer time to correct it. Some of them, they must be prohibited immediately in order to stop continuing with the work until they've been able to correct that. So we do that from time to time. We visit all the construction sites when it's necessary.
Thulas Nxesi, Minister of Labour, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Face the Nation. After the break, Chief Justice Raymond Zondo faces the nation. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the highest court in the country is facing a significant leadership transition as the position of Chief Justice will become vacant in August when Chief Justice Raymond Zondo's term ends. The Chief Justice was appointed to the Constitutional Court for a 12-year term starting from September 2012. The Constitutional Court has played a crucial role in achieving constitutional justice in the country, with Zondo advocating for the court's complete independence. Now, the Chief Justice joins us in studio tonight on Face the Nation. Thank you so much for joining us, Chief Justice. Good evening to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much.
So your term is ending in 3 months' time.
Yes.
How do you think you have fared? How confident are you that you're leaving a judiciary that is rock solid?
I'm very confident that I'm leaving a judiciary that is very strong, that has very strong personal independence, that can withstand all kinds of storms that might come its way as we continue with our democracy. I'm very confident. Its record is known. It's a record of fearlessness. It's a record of people who work very hard. It's a record of people who are very committed to the Constitution and its values.
Yeah. One of the things you wanted to see when you came in as the Chief Justice was the full institutional independence. You still rely heavily as the judiciary on the Department of Justice. Do you think the Minister of Justice has too much power over the judiciary? And when are we going to see that institutional independence?
Well, we should have seen it happen quite some time back already, but it hasn't happened. We are currently having discussions. The President and I are supposed to have a meeting to take the discussions forward. We had a meeting in December, which was characterized by very good spirit, but we should have had another meeting by now. He is obvious, as you know, he's busy with campaigning, but I recently wrote to him to remind him that it's very important that we should have that meeting because I would like to make sure that by the time I leave, at least there is a certain understanding that we have reached, that is the judiciary and the executive. The discussions are being handled at high level. The President representing as the head of the executive, and me representing the head of the judiciary. My understanding is that the President would also like to make sure that there is some agreement reached soon. But I don't know whether his responsibilities of campaigning for his party are going to end up preventing him from having a meeting to take this forward. But the discussions are ongoing.
It's been 10 years, Chief Justice.
Yeah.
How does it take so long for there to be an established agreement on the judiciary being fully institutionally independent? I mean, I remember a time when a committee was set up to try and look at the different formats through which this institution can take that kind of independence. How is it that 10 years later, there's still nothing?
Well, the reason is simply that the judiciary did its part. And that committee that you are talking about, I think, was the committee that was led by both the former Chief Justice Langa and Chief Justice Chaskalson, both who are late now. They prepared a report which was considered by the leadership of the judiciary and was adopted by the leadership of the judiciary. And the former Chief Justice handed it over to the executive to say, this is what we want. It was expected then that the executive would respond without any delay. But for 10 years, they just did not respond. It was completely unacceptable. But in the end, the judiciary couldn't do anything because you need them to agree. We can't force them to agree. You can put pressure and so on. But it was completely unacceptable. I don't think that they can defend their conduct themselves, that for 10 years they just ignored our proposals. Ultimately, when they did come back, we were told that they had commissioned research and so on, so that they could respond to our proposals comprehensively. We looked at those, and I then, because it was my time then, I appointed a committee which was led by the retired Judge President of Gauteng, Judge Ngwepe, and with some professors and some advocates who looked at that document and looked at other models and prepared a report which we have given to the executive, both to the President and the Minister, and we should have had another meeting by now. I'm hoping we are going to have one soon.
What are the consequences of this delay? Because as the judiciary, you're dealing with a number of challenges. I mean, I've had terrible stories of magistrates who have to park outside the court, where sometimes they're being accosted by the people they adjudicate matters on. There are judges who complain about deplorable working conditions, and these are the kind of issues you can fix as the head of the judiciary when you are truly independent. So what are the consequences of this delay and not having this institution being removed from the Department of Justice?
It means that our ability as the judiciary to strengthen and defend our constitutional democracy is weakened. If we had institutional independence, we would be stronger. We would be able to make decisions on the operations of the courts, on various matters relating to the courts, ourselves without having to have a member of the executive playing some role in regard to that. I mean, at the moment, if you take, for example, the issue of staff that work at the courts, basically, they are appointed by the executive, by the minister. The minister may have delegated some of his powers to the Secretary General of the Office of the Chief Justice, but basically they are the minister's powers. Of course, the Superior Courts Act makes provision that the head of court must be consulted and is consulted, but that's not the ideal thing. That's just the second prize. The ideal thing is there's no reason why the executive should have anything to do with the appointment of staff for the judiciary, because we have nothing to do with the appointment of their staff. We have nothing to do with the appointment of the staff of parliament, which are the other arms of the state. Our approach is that these three arms of the state are equal. And therefore, if one accepts that as a starting point, the next question is, there is no reason why this arm of the state shouldn't have exactly the independence independence as the other arms. As I say, whether you're talking about staff, you're talking about the building of courts, talking about the building of courtrooms, you need the executive. In Kenya, last year we had a judges conference and we had invited a former Chief Justice of Kenya who told us that in Kenya, the judiciary makes decisions about building courts and so on. We don't know anything about that, but that's how it should be. If we feel that we need more courtrooms, we should be able to make the necessary decisions. Of course, it doesn't mean that all those decisions would necessarily need to be taken by the judges, but it means that some of them may need to be taken by people who are accountable to the judiciary. We can have an entity which is run by people who are appointed by the judiciary. At the moment, there is the OCJ, the Office of the Chief Justice, which is very much connected with the executive, even though it's called the Office of the Chief Justice. But you could have an institution like that without any connections to the executive, run by people who are accountable to the judiciary, who can make certain decisions which judges don't need to be involved in. But the judges can make decisions to make sure that the courts are run properly and courts have got all that they need to have. Obviously, it doesn't mean that there would never be budgetary constraints. There will always be, but the decisions would be up to the judiciary. They wouldn't have to request the minister. At the moment, the Superior Courts Act provides that I should make a request to the minister with regard to the financing of the operations of the courts. That's unacceptable.
And at some point, there's going to be an impact on the administration of justice. I'm just thinking about the capacity constraints you have as the judiciary. We have seen delays in the issuing of judgments, and sometimes crucial judgments. I mean, there was recently in the electoral court where it took just over 3 weeks for a judgment, a full judgment to be delivered. Yes, an order was delivered, but the reasons were very important. It was urgent, it was necessary because the IEC needed to know what the clarity is, because we're a few days before elections. How do issues around capacity impact on that administration of justice, and how are you dealing as the head of the judiciary with the issues around capacity?
Well, they impact on the operations of the court and the operations of the judiciary very negatively. Because obviously, if you don't have enough staff, you're not going to operate efficiently. You're not going to be able to issue judgments quickly because everything takes longer because you are short-staffed. I mean, at the moment, if you talk about the issue of shortages of staff, you have a situation where, because of the budget cuts and the austerity measures that were imposed by the National Treasury, the judiciary can't fill certain posts, vacancies because of that. But when you talk about that, that is something that the judiciary was not even consulted about. So once we have full institutional independence, we are in charge of our own budget, we are in charge of the operations of the courts, we are in charge of our finances. We'll be able to make decisions ourselves according to the needs of the courts. We know the needs and we know the priorities. We won't have to go and ask somebody to approve something. So these challenges impact very negatively on the operations of the courts.
Is it sometimes due to capacity constraints when we see delayed judgments, or is it sometimes just an issue of judges that are just incompetent and are not doing their work? Because we've got 2 judges now that are going through the processes because they have taken the longest of time to deliver judgments, and there's just no justification to it. So it's not always capacity constraints. Sometimes it's judges that are not failing to do their work.
It's not always. But having said that, yes, it is true that you will find sometimes delays in the handing down of judgments, which has got nothing to do with capacity problems, just a particular judge. But I would say that those are very few and far between. You know, most of the time it's other challenges. But also sometimes a judgment is delayed not because the particular judge, for example, is lazy or is not pulling up his or her socks, but simply because the load is just too much. Sometimes you have courts where the load is quite a lot. And as a human being, you can only go up to a certain point. And of course, when it comes to that, you then talk about the question of increasing the number of judges in that particular court so that the load can be spread among a greater number of judges. But if you are going to have posts that must be filled, we must go to the executive and ask them to approve the creation of posts. And they will decide. I mean, I can make you an example. The Labour Court has had this problem for quite some time, and we have raised it with the executive, where there's a need for more courtrooms to be built. There's a need for more judges to be appointed, but before the judges can be appointed, posts must be created to which those judges will be appointed. Now, labor matters are some of those matters which need to be dealt with expeditiously. But as of last year, it was end of last year, I know that the Labour Court was not able to set matters down earlier than next year. So people end up having to wait for a long time. If we have the powers to make all the decisions ourselves, we would make the decisions ourselves.
After the break, I want us to talk about a plan that you had tried in order to deal with the capacity constraints, a plan to use the support services of former justices to assist with the backlog. That's what I will discuss after the break and other issues here on Face the Nation. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are sitting down with Chief Justice Raymond Zondo on Face the Nation tonight. And Chief Justice, we were talking earlier about the issues of capacity constraints and the backlog, even at the Constitutional Court. And one of the plans you had wanted to implement was to use the support services of former justices. I know Justice Froneman was one of them. Justice Zakia Kube as well was one of the retired justices that wanted to offer these support services. But that program was terminated. Why?
Well, let me start by answering the question why. It was terminated because there were not enough retired judges who were making themselves available, who were available to assist in this way. The whole plan was based on a number of retired judges taking part, because we didn't want a situation where it would just be 2 justices who are always, we wanted it to rotate. And those who did make themselves available, and I'm very grateful to them, Justice Zakia Kube and Justice Froneman, also they had indicated their position that they wouldn't be, they would like to take a break from a certain time. So they didn't contemplate that they would be involved for too long. But if we had a bigger number, it would rotate and then maybe they would come back later on. So basically that is why it was terminated. But it was a plan that was supposed to work, and I think would have worked if there were enough numbers, because what was happening was that part of what takes judges time in the Constitutional Court is the preparation of memos for new applications. And the retired justices were going to do that for us. Now, the advantage of them doing that for us is that it was people who had been at the court. They know exactly what should go into a memo and what we are looking for. Yeah. And but unfortunately, we had to terminate it. And we now want to have a situation where we can employ more lawyers, experienced lawyers, who will give support to the justices. But also we want to, would like an amendment to the Constitution to be made, which will allow panels of justices of the Constitutional Court to dispose of new applications, maybe panels of 3. If you have panels of 3, then out of 11 judges, you have at least, each one will do at least, each judge does 1/3 of the job that they were doing before. Yeah.
In hindsight, Chief Justice, do you think Judge Zak Yacoob was the right person to serve as the person assisting with this workload, given how he's conducted himself post-retirement? I mean, he has insulted journalists. He's been heard in recordings offering to pay people to make matters disappear. He has made direct comments about the former president, Jacob Zuma. That puts him in an awkward situation. So if he's going to be involved, and yes, he won't be adjudicating matters in the Constitutional Court, but the judiciary must always stand as a pillar of impartiality. When you bring in someone who is tainted and politically exposed like that, that puts some questions on the credibility of the judiciary.
Well, the important thing is, one, he wasn't going to be involved in deciding anything. So that's very important. And two, whatever it is that he's alleged to have said, it doesn't look like anybody takes it as sufficiently serious that he should be impeached, because even if you are retired, you can be impeached. But the most important thing is his role was not going to involve deciding anything. Yeah.
I think part of the reason why some people were concerned about that is we have high standards of judges.
Yeah.
Especially justices. That's why not everybody can be a justice.
Yeah.
I wish I could sit in the Constitutional Court, but I can't.
Yeah.
That's why we still continue to pay judges and justices even beyond retirement, because we expect them to behave and conduct themselves in a certain way.
Yeah.
But in this case, Judge Zak Yacoob has not done that. And I accept what you say, that maybe what he has done was not serious enough to warrant impeachment, but it's serious enough to question his ethics. It's serious enough to question his conduct as a judge. When someone insults journalists, understanding how critical their responsibility and work is in the country, when someone offers to pay somebody to make a matter go away, you may not impeach them, but you've got to question their ethics.
Well, put it this way. We needed retired justices to play a certain role, which was non-adjudicative, and we decided that it was the right thing to make sure that everybody who is retired in the Constitutional Court could participate. As far as I'm concerned, as long as he was playing that role, then he was going to be helpful to us. We would make the decisions as the judges. He would not make any decision. But of course, people who feel aggrieved by the conduct of any judge, whether serving or retired, must know that there's a place where they can go to lay complaints so that those issues can be dealt with and decided, particularly because some of the things you read about in the newspapers, you don't know if, when tested, they would stand, you know. So it's very important to emphasize that as far as judges are concerned, both retired and serving, we have a body where anybody who feels that that judge has behaved in an unacceptable manner, has spoken in an unacceptable manner, that's improper, they must report so that those issues can be ventilated, and then we can know whether for sure that judge is guilty of something or not.
Let's talk about the credibility of the judiciary. Where do you place it? Do you think people still have full confidence in the judiciary, or has its credibility been affected in some ways? You have seen the kind of attacks, not only broadly on the judiciary, but even personal attacks on specific judges over the years.
Yeah. I believe that, generally speaking, the judiciary enjoys credibility in South Africa. It may well be that the levels of credibility that it enjoys differs from sector to sector, you know, in society. You know, some people are more closely, work closely with the judiciary or observe closely what it is doing than others. Others hear one bad thing that some judge has done, and then it's like all the judges have done that. So I think that the judiciary still enjoys quite a lot of credibility. That is partly why we have so many cases that are brought to courts, because people believe that the courts are still doing their function the way they should do it.
And your duty as the head of the judiciary is also to protect the judges against whom these personal attacks are intentioned.
Yes.
Have you been able to do that?
Well, I certainly have, but I must say that that doesn't mean that each time something is said about a judge, I have to jump up and say something. I have to make a judgment call, for example, as to when to respond. Sometimes by responding to a particular statement or attack, you just make it last longer in the media, whereas sometimes if you ignore it, it goes away. So it's a judgment call that one makes to say, now here one must respond. Sometimes you say you don't respond. Sometimes you speak to the judge consent and hear what they think.
Yeah.
And I've had situations where I was approached, I think it may have been 2 occasions, because certain things had appeared in the media about certain judges, they're being attacked. And I said my view was that at that stage, let's not say anything. But I said if the judge concerned felt strongly that something should be said, they must tell me.
Yeah.
And they said, no, it's fine, let's leave it. And it ended like that.
I'd like to bring in some inputs from our viewers, Chief Justice. We've been asking you what your assessment of the judiciary is today, the state of the judiciary, the credibility of the judiciary. The question for you tonight is, what is your assessment of the state of the judiciary today? We've got some WhatsApp voice notes that have come through and some tweets as well. We'll start with the tweets. Mzufukile says, the judiciary is doing well. Unfortunately, some judges and magistrates are being blamed for decisions which are not doing justice to the victims because of the incompetence of police and the NPA. The Observer says, better than in many neighboring countries, but very inefficient. I know someone who's been waiting 6 months for a crucial High Court judgment. Now, we also have some voice notes that have come through. Let's hear what some of you had to say.
Good evening, Clement and the viewers at home. My name is Mcabo Mkize. from Dundee KZN. My take on this one, the assessment on our judicial services, I think where we got it wrong, it's whereby we decided that the last signature, the last note to appoint a Chief Justice must come from the President. I think that's where we got it wrong, because obviously some other decision were going to be politicized.
All right, thank you so much for your WhatsApp voice notes and your tweets as well. Do you agree with that, Chief Justice? That the President must be removed?
Well, I don't know. I feel like his statement is incomplete. It's like he didn't tell us
He left
why.
it somewhere.
Yeah, he didn't tell us why.
Yeah.
You know, why he's pushing is expressing that view. So without knowing why, it's difficult to
but I
say.
suppose, to be fair, there's the judicial services. I mean, there's a whole work that happens where the JSC interviews the justices or the judges, and then they make a recommendation to the President. And if I'm not mistaken, the Constitution doesn't say the President may or not. The President must act on that recommendation. So it's not like the process is solely dedicated to the President.
Well, it's different in terms of the Constitution. The powers of the President when he appoints just judges, High Court judges, Supreme Court of Appeal judges, judges president of the various divisions of the High Courts and specialist courts, and judges of the Supreme Court of Appeal. The dispensation is different. I think it's very close to what you are saying. The JSC will interview the candidates, and the Constitution says it must then advise the President who to appoint in regard to those judges. And there, the general understanding is that the President is bound to go along with that, unless something comes up that he needs to put before the JSC that the JSC may not have been aware. That's one category. But then there is another category, that is the Chief Justice, the Deputy Chief Justice, the President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and the Deputy President of the Supreme Court of Appeal. Those categories also have different processes. Now there, the President has got more power, more leeway to appoint whoever. So the JSC, in terms of the Chief Justice, doesn't have the power to recommend. They just need to say whether the person, if it's one person, is suitable or not. If it's more than one, they must interview the person and say those people and say whether they are suitable for appointment. And then it's up to the President to choose. So you see, our Constitution, you know, those who drafted it knew why they wanted the President to have more power under this category and less power under that category. So there's no recommendation. They must just say suitable or not suitable.
I want us to touch on state capture a little bit. You spent some time on the State Capture Commission as the chairperson of that inquiry. It took some time. 1 billion rand was spent. There's still no politician or any high-profile individual in orange overalls. Do you think it was worth it?
Well, there is no doubt that it was worth it. I don't want to talk too much about it today. We might find another time, but it was worth it. But still, there is a lot that hasn't happened, which should happen, and the pace is very slow. But there's no doubt that it was worth it. One, we got to know exactly who were involved in what and what did they do. We got to know how much of the taxpayers' money was stolen. We got to know what processes were followed. We are wiser in terms of what we need to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Whether we do that or not is something else.
Given what's been done so far, can we prevent another one?
Well, I see gaps at this stage. I see gaps. I think that there is a real risk that it can still happen. So, but as I say, we can discuss it on another day.
As we wrap up, on Friday there's going to be an important matter in the Constitutional Court around the MK party, the former President Jacob Zuma versus the IEC. My understanding is that you won't be sitting in that matter. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But there's been a request for the other justices to also not participate, given their role in the previous judgment that was handed out to the former president. How are you handling that as the head of the judiciary?
Well, let me say that because I've said publicly in another station that I won't sit in a matter which involves Mr. Zuma. So I've said that publicly, so I'll just repeat that I won't sit in that matter, not because of whatever he or his party may be saying now, but the reason why, and not because of whatever he said at the commission, because there was no substance to it, but simply because at the moment he and I are involved in litigation where he has challenged my appointment
as the Chief
so
Justice.
Because we have this litigation against each other, as Chief Justice, I decided that it wouldn't be right for me to sit in a matter which involves him. But since I won't sit in that matter, the Deputy Chief Justice and my other colleagues are handling that matter, and I'm not expressing any views in it.
And you're not able to say if there's justification for the application for the recusal of the other justices? Because it causes a conundrum.
No. It's a matter with which my colleagues will deal with, and I'm staying away from saying anything about it.
Okay. Any regrets? I suspect this is the last time I talk to you on this platform before you retire. Any regrets about the way you have handled things over the last 2 years, particularly as Chief Justice?
No, I don't have any regrets at all. I have appreciation, for example, for the manner in which my colleagues, both at the Constitutional Court and the Judiciary, generally the leaders of other courts, judges, president of the SCA, have supported me and have cooperated with me during this time. So I don't have regrets. Maybe if it's the regret, it's that my time was so short. I would have liked to have more time and therefore be able to do more than I'm able to do within this time.
Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, thank you so much for making time for us this evening, and good luck with your retirement.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to you for watching the Tuesday edition of Face the Nation. We'll be back on Thursday at 8 p.m. Thanks for watching. Cheers.